Okay, I'm going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, if you haven't heard of this hierarchy, I will briefly explain it. So, Maslow kind of ranks all of our needs on a hierarchy, and these needs are those that we have to obtain in order to reach our full potential as human beings, right? And he visualizes these needs on a pyramid. So, at the bottom of the pyramid are the most basic needs, the physiological needs, right? So, food, water, shelter, clothing. Okay, again, the most basic needs, the things we need to survive before we can even worry about all of the other needs, right? So, the second level in the pyramid is our need for security or our need for safety. So, you have to protect yourself from the elements, you have to protect yourself from those who may commit violence against you, right? And above that, the third level is our need for belonging. Okay, this means love and affection. We have to belong to a family or to a group of friends or to some greater group of people than ourselves, right? After this level is esteem. We have a need for esteem, self-esteem. We have to feel good about ourselves. And beyond that, we have a need for other people to feel good about us, right? And the top level on the pyramid is our need for self-actualization. Self-actualization is kind of a deeper purpose in life. It is an individualized purpose that we find, right? Now, the difference between self-actualization and physiological is that everyone needs food, water, shelter, right? We all need those basic physiological needs. On the other hand, the self-actualization needs, we don't necessarily need them as bad as we need those physiological needs. However, we do need them to reach our full potential. And these self-actualization needs, again, they're kind of more specialized, they're more individualized. Anyone can eat most foods, but not every self-actualization, not every individualized purpose at the top of the pyramid is going to work for everybody else, right? Someone might need to be a musician to meet those needs. Someone else might need to be, might need to run a homeless shelter or something, right? What I'm trying to get across here again is that at the top of the pyramid, that self-actualization need is kind of individualized. So what I really want to talk about though in this video is how we respond to a scarcity of needs, and in particular how we respond to different levels of this pyramid when certain levels are not being met. So if you are a wannabe musician and that is your self-actualized purpose, and you want to be a pianist, okay? So you want to play piano. Let's say you can't get yourself a piano. You can't get your hands on a piano. You can't afford one, or maybe there are just none that you can buy. Bottom line, there's a scarcity of the pianos that you need to meet your self-actualized purpose, right? What are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to try to play on someone else's piano. Maybe you buy a keyboard instead, or maybe you study music theory in the meantime while you're saving up for that piano. Or maybe you listen to more classical music or something, right? This is a very tame response to scarcity, right? There's a scarcity of pianos in your life, and you're going to have a tame response to that scarcity, most likely. On the other hand, if we have a scarcity of physiological needs, if we don't have food, we don't have enough water, don't have a place to live, we're going to respond very differently. Perhaps we commit crimes. Perhaps we steal from people to feed ourselves the next meal. Perhaps we commit violence. Okay? Again, what I'm trying to highlight here is that there's a big difference in our response to a scarcity of physiological needs and our response to a scarcity of self-actualized needs. This scarcity of physiological needs presents a very big problem. And that problem stems from the violence. Okay, so let me explain this. So imagine you have all of your physiological needs met. You're eating, you're sleeping, you have a place to live, you have water, etc. You have clothing. But someone down the street doesn't have those things. They're starving, they're hungry, they're living on the street in the harsh winter, right? Those people are they're going to perhaps commit crimes in order to achieve those needs, because the only other option is to die. They're going to get desperate. They might steal from you. They might attack you violently, right? What does that violence do? what does that theft do? Well, that theft infringes on your basic needs. Perhaps they're stealing your food. Now you don't have enough food. Perhaps they are attacking you violently. Now you are not meeting your needs for security, for safety, right? In other words, because someone else in the world doesn't have their physiological needs met, they are going to infringe on your ability to meet your physiological needs and your security needs, right? Again, this is a big problem. This creates a vicious cycle depending on how we respond to this phenomenon. So if we look at a billionaire, for example, why is it that they're collecting so much money? Well, I suspect it's because they are afraid of violence. They are trying to insulate themselves or protect themselves from the people who are committing violence, the people who don't have their physiological needs met, who are driven to commit violence. Why else do billionaires walk around with bodyguards? What these billionaires are trying to do is they're trying to insulate themselves from the woes of poverty, right? From the results that stem from not having your physiological needs met. But at the same time, the billionaire who collects excess, or even the upper class individual, they are also creating scarcity of physiological needs. If you're collecting so much excess that you are kind of restricting those needs from being met in other people's lives, then you are feeding the very violence that you're trying to run away from with the excess, right? In other words, the collection of excess manufactures scarcity, and that scarcity justifies the further collection of excess because you try to insulate yourself from the violence that results from that scarcity. So we have to understand this phenomenon. We have to become conscious of it. If we don't, we will remain in this vicious cycle. And again, we have to ask ourselves, why did the billionaires spend their time with bodyguards surrounding them? It's probably because they're not safe. And frankly, they probably aren't safe because the people who don't have their physiological needs met, they want to take from those billionaires. And, it's interesting because in the past, we perhaps didn't have the ability to meet all of our physiological needs. If a drought came along and wiped out all the crops, there's nothing we can do about it. But today we have technology that can kind of skirt around these problems. We have the technology to pipe water hundreds of miles across several states in order to keep that crop production stable. If we don't embrace the abundance that our technology has offered, we will remain in a vicious cycle of violence and scarcity forever. What the point I'm trying to get across here is that we have to completely build the bottom of the pyramid before we can build the next level. And that means collectively. We cannot think of this Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of individual needs. You can't solely focus on your needs and ignore everyone else's. If that bottom of the pyramid is not built out for everybody, then it hinders your ability to build out your own pyramid. So once we build out that whole bottom, the whole base, and once we fulfill everyone's physiological needs, the rest of the pyramid will light up very quickly. So instead, though, what we're doing is perhaps we're falling into materialism. Instead of actually fulfilling the rest of that pyramid, the self-actualization, we're trying to fulfill that self-actualization with materialism. We buy stuff, and we think that stuff is going to kind of fulfill us, but it never does, right? And the proof in that it never does is that we have to keep buying more stuff. If it worked, we would stop buying stuff. We are very good at manufacturing supercars, and we're also very good at manufacturing food, but we're not good at distributing that food appropriately. There are 600,000 homeless people in the United States, and there are 3 to 5 million empty homes. It seems like the problem is, the solution to that homeless problem is sitting there, literally sitting there. We also have 40% of the nation who's obese, alongside 9 million people starving to death every year in the world. Again, the solution to the starvation is sitting on the store shelves. We're just not distributing the necessities correctly. And this abundance has been enabled by our technology for the first time in recorded history. And we're still kind of holding on to those instincts, those greedy instincts, because we believe that we have to collect excess to protect ourselves from the violence. There's this dichotomy between the terrorist and the freedom fighter, right? And what this effectively is that when hungry people commit violence, we call them terrorists. When well-fed, well-housed, well-funded governments commit violence, we call them freedom fighters. The dichotomy between the freedom fighter and the terrorist is that the terrorist are the people whose physiological needs are not met, and the freedom fighters are the people who justify the collection of excess to protect themselves from the violence that the terrorists are committing. But they don't realize that the excess today that we have due to our technology is the very thing creating the scarcity. The scarcity today is not created, it's not thrusted upon us by the environment. It is manufactured because of the abundance our technology has enabled. We have to understand that the formula has changed due to that abundance, due to that technology. And if we don't understand that that formula has changed, if we don't become conscious of the abundance, again, we remain in that vicious cycle, okay? And we've even gone so far as to develop a military-industrial complex. There are people profiting from war, and the reason they want to profit is because they are trying to basically harvest materialism out of the freedom fighting. They're trying to harvest materialism out of the fact that we have failed to meet the physiological needs of everyone on the planet. The needs at the bottom of the pyramid, they have to be collectively met before the top of the pyramid can be built, right? It makes sense. If you try to put the top brick on the pyramid without building the base, it's gonna just fall to the ground, right? Maybe it's gonna tumble. Maybe if you only build half of the base, it's just gonna fall to the ground. This is an analogy between the physical world and the kind of the economy we've built, but it's quite a valid analogy if you think about it. Again, you can't think of Maslow's hierarchy in terms of individuals. You can't focus solely on your individual needs. At the bottom of the pyramid, and then the second level and the third level and so forth, if other people's needs, physiological needs, are not met, if you want the pyramid to be built perfectly, or something close to perfectly, you have to put a lot more effort than we currently are into building that bottom level. I make this point a lot, okay? You have to meet everyone's needs, okay? You have to meet their needs before you can expect the world to improve, before you can expect world peace, before we can avoid all of these wars that we're in. This video about Maslow's hierarchy is kind of just another way to make a point that I make in a lot of my videos. Again, when we build out that bottom of that base of that pyramid perfectly, it will enable the next level immediately, because people won't be encouraged to commit violence against those other people, right? Because they don't have the scarcity of food, right? They don't have scarcity of shelter. They don't have scarcity of water. It's quite simple, really. We have all the answers. We have the abundance. We have the food, the shelter, the water. We just have to stop exploiting people because we fear the violence that other people commit. The reason they commit that violence, again, is because they don't have the physiological needs met. Violence almost becomes a need when you don't have your physiological needs met. And we have to become conscious of this again. If we don't become conscious of it, we'll never get out of this vicious cycle. And perhaps it leads to a World War III, and we're all afraid of nukes, right? Maybe nukes are a blessing. Maybe nukes are a blessing in disguise because they ensure mutually assured destruction. And maybe that'll wake us up. Maybe it'll get us thinking about the consequences of endless war? I certainly hope it does. Thanks for watching.